Chris Tuttle is one of the hottest names in coaching right now. Former pro bodybuilder, registered dietitian, and champion of holistic approach to bodybuilding nutrition.
I don't believe in just being like, all right, starting from scratch. Here's a new diet. Here's a completely new training program. I get very, very sore. I'm constantly fatigued. Well, you could assume that we have a recovery problem. Over the last 5 years, I've just noticed that I'm getting better results with clients focusing on the than anything I've ever changed in the past.
How are you, Chris?
Good, my friend. Very good.
Have I pronounced your last name correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Because I was repeating it times after times before our podcast just to say it correctly. Because I even watched a short clip from the podcast with Fuad Abiad just to say it correctly. So I'm very happy that I make it. Okay, I bring you today because you are not just a coach, but actually you are a registered like a dietitianist. So that's put our talk today to the another level, I think, because most of the coaches have like a really shallow and brief knowledge about the diet. To be honest, they more like depending on the macronutrients like a protein, carbs, and fats, and not like a deep down when it comes to the digestion, when it comes to the overall well-being. And I think that's important, especially when it comes to the competitors, just because they are many of competitors that's finished their career and now have problems with their guts, with their digestions and stuff like that. So I think that's a very important topic to speak about. But first of all, how are you, man?
I'm doing very well, very well. It's getting a little colder in Texas lately, and I'm not a fan of the cold anymore. It's 60. It's like I wake up in the morning, it's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not really super cold, but it's a little too cold for me. That's why I got a sweatshirt on.
I don't even know that it's a cold in Texas. I always thought that Texas is like a very warm place when you actually can burn yourself.
Very warm place. But the temperature sometimes can fluctuate, meaning today might be 60 degrees Fahrenheit and then tomorrow's going to be 90, you know?
Oh, okay. Oh my
So
God.
it changes.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate it. I'd rather to be like a minus 20 all the time than fluctuate like that, because I cannot adjust to that, to be honest. It's very hard for me. Okay. So today we're gonna speak about building the perfect competitor, and we're gonna made. I hope that we have that many times to made through the off-season period, and then the transition from the off-season to the contest prep, and from the contest prep to the peak week, and from the peak week to the end of the competitive seasons. And the most important topic, I think, what to do after the show, because that's like a wall that everyone have to face it, and not everyone actually made it correctly to be correct, politically correct, and say it like that. So first of all, let's assume that we're gonna speak about like a maybe like a semi or a heavy competitor guy, okay? Because we have to assume something, because if we're gonna talk about the ladies, guys, men's physique, classic physique, and stuff like that, there's gonna be too many variables. So we're gonna talk today about heavy guy competitors. So like a over 100 kilo guy, for example, and let's assume that is a guy who came to you for the first time and you didn't know his body, but you have like a whole year to prepare him for the show. Means off season, all of the parts of the off season, so like maybe like a health phase and stuff like that, through the contest prep, and then the actually show. Okay, so first of all, how do you set up training during the off season? You're more like a volume guy, like a heavy duty style of guy, or you mix it both? What do you think about
Well,
it?
I think, as many of us coaches can kind of attest this, or at least I hope so, over the years, you kind of start to change your way of thinking. You start to see consistent trends that either work or don't work. And one of the most consistent things that I found that was a shortcoming with most bodybuilders was the execution of the exercises they're doing. They could be doing, everybody always wants to know what exercise to do, what rep range to travel in, what kind of cluster set, drop set, but nobody's looking at, am I getting the most out of every repetition? Am I correctly displacing the correct tension on the muscle that I'm targeting? Nobody's thinking about that. They're just thinking about moving that weight from point A to point B for X number of reps or whatever, and beast mode, go failure. But that only takes somebody so far. Once somebody's at more of an advanced level and there's some weak body parts that are not responding like they should, you have to kind of take a look much closer to how they're doing the movement. So honestly, the very first thing I do when a competitor comes to me in the off season is, obviously, without discussing PEDs and nutrition yet, in that aspect, I look at their training split. I see what they're doing, which the split I don't usually change unless they're training 6 days a week. Then I'll immediately bring it to 5. Okay. And then usually the next thing I'll look at is how much volume they're doing and how many failure sets of those sets are they doing? Because sometimes people are like, you get the mentality of, oh, I got to go out all the way, and every single working set's to failure, right? Well, as we know in today's day and age, that's not accurate. That's not a good thing to do. Drives up too much fatigue, creates too much aches and pains, overuse injuries. And obviously, if your muscles are in an extreme fatigue state, the ability to load the muscles greatly diminished as the workout goes through. So therefore, sometimes frequency becomes more important. But I'll look at how many failure sets they're doing, and make sure they're only training 5 days per week. And then I usually will keep relatively everything the same unless I see something catastrophic, as in failure sets or every set. I might say, okay, if you're doing 12 working sets of chest and every set is to failure, I want only 6 sets to be muscular failure, even though that's not exactly ideal in my mind, but it's better than what they were doing. So we're going to have a little enhanced recovery. And then the next thing I'll look at very carefully before I change anything else is how they're doing the movements. I look at their physique, see they have a shallow upper chest, see in the front relaxed front double bicep, that they don't really have that good V taper in the lats. So they don't have that big lat recruitment going on. And then I notice in the radial bicep, their teres minor and major are very developed. So then I start to look at their pull down movements and how they're rowing. And most of the time, they're rowing more with their teres minor major. They're not really getting that direct lat recruitment because, as you know, everybody's body's built a little different and people's movement patterns vary based on their genetics and how they're put together. So sometimes you really have to take a close look at the mechanics of the motion they're doing, how they're developing, and what you can do to change that to displace more tension on another muscle than the dominant muscles they're used to using. For example, I see so many people in lat pull downs. They're doing lat pull down. They're elevating their shoulder up high. And then when they come down, they're swinging their weight, their body, and their arm down, and their arm is coming this direction, not this direction. So usually I'm like, okay, I'm looking at their body and see how their lats develop. I'm like, well, we have to create a more tension to the lat. So keeping the shoulder down, keeping your rib cage down, as in your spine's in neutral position, and ultimately pulling directly down the elbows into the rib cage, displacing more tension in the lat will give them more recruitment in the area they're weak in. So that's usually what I will take a look at. And then I'll ask them, of course, injuries, because a lot of people say, oh, my knees are really in pain. I'm like, okay, so why don't you do me a favor? I need you to do a front squat or a goblet squat, very, very slow. And let's see your mechanics. And then let's see your mechanics of the back squat. And most of the time, front squat, goblet squat, people are doing great, right? Because the weight's displaced in front of them. Yeah. As soon as you put weight on someone's back, now you see they have poor ankle mobility. You see that they have poor core stability. And then you can see where their knee pain is occurring because of the lack of mobility. Then I start addressing the mobility issues that are addressing that knee pain so they can actually train properly on their legs. So that's the direction I take training. Once those are ironed out and that individual's needs, then I start to take a closer look at exercise selection of what they're choosing. But typically, I don't change the exercise selection of what they're doing right away. It's more or less just like you would take somebody for nutrition, right? If they already have a baseline plan, I'm not going to change it 360 degrees the day one. I'm going to take their plan, see what changes we can make, and then start progressing from that nutrition plan based on their response. So with training, the same thing. I look at their physique. They built that body at that point doing X. So now we're going to start trying to mold that training program going in the direction I want based on that individual's needs. I don't believe in just being like, all right, starting from scratch, here's a new diet, here's a completely new training program, which is weird because sometimes people want that. They're like, I want a full change. I'm like, a full change is not required. And sometimes it's a big mistake because now you're changing so many variables at once that your data points and the progression of your body changes over the next 8 weeks is going to be hard to track and hard to understand, you know? So that's normal like to do. And the other aspect is some people freak out when you change everything, right? You get the bodybuilders that are very, one-dimensional, and they're like, this is how I do it. This is how I've always done it. So like getting them to change sometimes is difficult. So you always have to keep that in mind as the client competitors. Are they going to be open to changing things, right? So usually, in my opinion, slow changes and implementing an individual base change is the best approach in my experience.
Yeah, two questions that popped into my mind. First of all, how do you gonna recognize that someone are actually doing 6 or 12 sets to actual failure? Because sometimes they think there is a failure, but you look at the video and you see that he has like a 5, sometimes even 12 reps in reserve. So that's actually very, very hard to judge. And the second question is, how often, in your opinion, you should change a whole training split? Is that something that's actually important? Or if you're making a progress with a one training split, you should keep it as long as you progress it?
Hugely sorry for the interruption, guys, but thanks to your comments, subscriptions, and thumbs up, I'm even able to create a podcast like you're watching right now. So if you can, please leave the subscription, comments, and simply a thumbs up. If you wanted to further support me, please use my code. And without further ado, let's get back to the podcast.
All right, so the first question is, you're right. Now, when it comes to obviously arms, people are trained to failure, of course, right? Because the rate of perceived exertion is so low. People are always trained to failure on chests, and probably doing 3 or 4 force reps more than they should be anyway, because they want to be stronger than they actually are in that movement. Back, like dumbbell row, barbell row, yeah, people could be bitching out for sure. Cable rows, obviously some people might go into failure. I usually sometimes will assess that based on what they tell me without actually seeing a movement, because if they usually say to me, if their legs are small or smaller, and they have knee pain, clearly their probably mechanics are off and they're not even coming close to failure. So we already know that. And then I'll look at them and be, oh, I have a lot of aches and pains. Their physique doesn't have a lot of pop to it. I get very, very sore. I'm constantly fatigued. Well, you could assume that we have a recovery problem, but I will ask them for videos of their top set and their back off set to see what that is, because you're 100% right. Especially in leg press. I see leg press. I'm like, dude, you had at least 8 reps left in that. Like, you really did. Squats, I usually never have anybody remotely come close to failure. Maybe an RIR of like 2 or 3, just because of the risk of injury. But lunges, split squats, hack squat, you can come pretty damn close to complete failure, provided you have a good spotter and using good technique safely. Excuse me. But I will look at videos. I do look at off season. I'm more hands-on with training and training videos, because that's ultimately the driver in getting bigger, right? Yeah. I mean, where everybody's looking at PEDs, like, what do we take for this? What do we take for this? I'm like, you can take whatever the hell you want. If you're not driving the stimulus and recovering, you're not growing. And then the other people are like, well, I just eat a ton of food. Well, you're just going to get fat and lose insulin resistance and then insulin sensitivity. And then you're going to be in a bad situation. So I tend to shift more my focus on training and driving that training performance and progression. And then of course, nutrition is important, but it's not the primary focus for me in the off season, because as you know, you're not making massive manipulations every few days in the off season in the diet, you know?
Of course.
Now, training split, I mean, this, it's hard sometimes to make calls like this because we tend to base our experience on our own personal experience, right? And I pretty much ran the same similar split for 16 years. And I did a bro split. I loved it. I worked it. I've tried to push-pull legs. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. And just like many people will say, well, frequency trained muscle is the best way for hypertrophy. But if you don't like the program, you're probably not going to train with as enthusiasm as you would. Therefore, it might not be a fit for you. So I've always done the bro split typically. And I usually would only adjust it based on lack of recovery issues. Say if a body part one body part is not recovering, it's impeding another, right? Arms and affecting back, or if my triceps are overly fatigued during a chest training session and triceps is too soon, or my shoulders are a little taxed from pressing and I have to do shoulders. So that's usually when I address the split. Now, when it comes to like individuals, what I do is I'll take their current split, sometimes look at the weak body parts and decide if we can increase frequency on a particular body part that's generally a little faster to recover. Meaning I don't like to have somebody train legs twice per week. I just think it's too much unless volume is really controlled. But I do like to train things like shoulders or back twice per week, but hit slightly differently with different exercises. And sometimes I might implement an increase in frequency of somebody's training program and change their split in regard to addressing a weak body part in that instance. So for some reason, I never seem to increase chest training frequency because I've just failed to see a difference in a client's physique, because I always feel that people tend to train too much to failure for chest, because they're trying to get every rep they possibly can in their pressing movements. And I usually will focus more on execution for the chest, more carefully, making sure they're getting the max tension they need to grow the pecs instead of just pushing weight, and then address from there. But I don't manipulate the split as much as I manipulate exercises and focus on changing how they do the exercises. I've changed I might change my mind again in 5 years, but over the last 5 years, I've just noticed that I'm getting better results with clients focusing on the change of execution than anything I've ever changed in the past, regardless of rep range,
Do you think that actually a periodization of the training split, meaning like you building a phase or build up a volume over the time, is something that is useful in the bodybuilding or not exactly? Because I thought that this is more for the like a power lifters and like Olympic weightlifters and people from that area than a bodybuilders, because actually you do not have to periodize your training if your goal is to just stimulate the muscle, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I have a great answer for you for that. Yeah. So I think there's two thought processes in my mind with this, right? Is implementing some type of revolving volume schedule to prevent any type of need for an emergency deload, I call it, right? Where you start to see fatigue accumulate fast, and all of a sudden the client failed to tell you it the week before, and they go, dude, I'm fried, I'm shot, I've had 3 days in a row of horrible training, I'm flat, my joints hurt. And it's like, wait a minute, where'd this come from? And they're like, well, I didn't really want to tell you because things are going well. So one part of me says, for certain individuals, implementing some type of revolving rotation periodization is worth it. Now, I have a couple of clients they will do minimum required volume, maximum required volume, and then a week where it's not a deload week, but it's more of a week that's designed solely on trying to make a lighter load more difficult. For example, my deload would be using less loads overall, same rep range, same RIR, same everything outside of weight. And I'll say to them, you have to make this % of your normal poundages harder by, when you're pressing, you bring the weight down, you're stopping the weight in the stretch position for 1 second count, and then you squeeze. Come down, squeeze. For a squat, you're coming down, pausing, and then going up. So obviously, as you know, you lose that elasticity of the muscle that to generate power out of the hole. So now all of a sudden your muscles stop, and then they have to push up against the weight, which makes it more difficult, but you're using lighter load. And that, in my opinion, has been able to drive more of that client's ability to enhance mind-muscle connection. So when they go back again to their next week of a little bit heavier loads and eliminating those types of pause movements or intensifiers within the set, they're able to drive more mind-muscle connection, more tension, and then it repeats. Now, what you said, I also have people where I feel that they don't drive themselves into the ground so easily, and I will implement a linear program and then obviously add volume or whatever change we might need to increase as far as progressive basis based on their ability to progress, and only deload when those signs tell us that we need to deload. Because as you know, there's a couple clients that you might have that mentality like Dorian Yates, right? Yeah. Where like they just want to go balls out and they don't like training any other way than going balls out. I have a client in Wisconsin, here in the United States, and dude, he's a balls out type of guy. And to get him to like back off, he just hates training. He wants to leave the gym trashed, you know? So for him, it's like we train like every other day. You know what I mean? So we have to figure out a way that we can consistently stimulate the muscle and recover over time, because if you're having to deload, emergency deload every few weeks, then you're driving up too much fatigue too quickly. You know what I mean? You should be able to stay on top of that recovery, because if you're not, you're really not going to grow, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way is to auto-regulate, but the problem is the feedback. That's the only issues when it comes to the coaching, actually. Because if you're not even a coaching, because if you're doing it yourself, you always think in your head, am I a pussy, or if I really need it? So that's always that's the voice in your head that's telling you, maybe one more training every week.
And you brought up a really good point that every listener needs to understand completely, whether you're a coach or you're a client of a coach, is, you know, someone's ability to progress and make the appropriate change is really dependent on the client's ability to appropriately give feedback to the coach, and for them to be able to accurately perceive what's going on with their body. Because I had this conversation with John Jewett the other day about one of the most difficult things about being a coach is you're trusting, well, you can't truly trust, but you're trying to get the best feedback from the client to make the most appropriate change. And there's a lot of times where the client, like you said, like, I'm not a pussy, I can push through it, when there's a lot more going on there than you don't know about. And you're like, well, okay, cool, we'll just keep pushing. And then all of a sudden you're in a hole. And you're like, wait, where'd this hole come from? And they're like, oh, well, I thought it was normal. Because some people don't know it's normal. And that's the hardest part, is really understanding where that client is, how they're perceiving it themselves and what they're telling you. And, you know, as my father's a physician, and he always will tell me, he goes, you know, as a doctor, a successful doctor, it's, you know, every patient of his might have a different way of explaining pain, right? So he, as a doctor, has to accurately perceive what that patient's telling him to make the right decision on the signs or symptoms. And he goes, it's hard, because sometimes people might say something to you that makes you believe everything's okay when it's not okay. So that's the hardest part, is that connection. You know, people always talk about you got to communicate with your coach, but it's more or less you have to be really perceptive with how you're feeling, and just bullet point to the coach what you're feeling, and the coach can interpret that information, ask further questions to make the right decision. I feel that some of my clients that are more experienced and they have a good understanding generally of their body, we get along really well, and we do really well because they give me the right information. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, it's funny. The hardest clients I have are actually military clients, because they're used to dealing with pain and discomfort. So when you're like, hey, how are you doing? They're like, perfect, fine, I keep going. It's like, you sure? Yep, 100%. Because in the military, that's what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? So like they've been driven in their whole life for 10 years, you know, in the military to embrace the suck. But in contest prep, you have to know what is acceptable suck and what is not, you know?
Yeah. that's the problem in both ways, because there is some guys that actually would love to have a cheat meal every other day just because they are trashed and stuff like that. So it's very, very hard to really assume that someone is actually telling you the truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the hardest part. Okay, let's come to the diet. And the biggest question is, do you like your guys stay lean, or you think that there is a place for the something called like a dirty bulk? And what do you mean by dirty bulk? Maybe let's put it that way. How much body fat it's okay to gain during the off season?
Well, simply to answer that question, first off, everybody's different. You're going to have the outliers that genetically just are just fat people, and they're not going to maintain a visible midsection ab definition. They're just not. And then you're going to have, honestly, most people in the middle, and then you have the outliers that are genetically lean that will be able to have decent ab definition all year round and still be able to bulk. Ideally, I want them. This is the best way to put it. I don't know if you ever heard of a set point theory, but I'm going to explain to people what set point theory is. Set point theory is the amount of body fat that your body is happy with. And that amount of body fat is usually determined through adolescence. It's a theory, okay? So generally, if somebody's slightly below their set point, meaning below the happy point of their body fat, whatever that might be, if their happy point is 15% and they're 12%, or if their happy point is 12% and they're 8%, or their happy point's 18% and they're 15%, they usually will have more hunger. They usually have better insulin sensitivity, and they usually will have better training. And they'll constantly, in some degree, will be relatively decently hungry in the off season, even though they're shoving a lot of food. In other words, their appetite's not going to be complete garbage. That's where I like to float. I rather have somebody on a leaner side, no question. I mean, let's be honest, dude. You get to a point in somebody's, because this is the thing. When somebody puts on excessive body weight and body fat, 90% of the time, that person eventually becomes very inflamed. Their joints hurt, soft tissue starts to hurt, insulin sensitivity goes down, their appetite's trash, sleep is trash, because now they have excess body weight on top of already being too heavy for muscles and gear, and they're going to ultimately have trouble breathing at night, probably sleep apnea. And then if their sleep diminishes in the off season, you can fucking forget it. You can forget it. Your ability to grow, perform is just completely gone. So in my experience as of late, I've had way more success keeping people on the leaner side and the more hungry side. It doesn't mean, when I say hungry, let me explain. They're not looking forward to their food in the off season, but they're able to get it down. Okay. They're not sitting there going like, drinking chicken shakes and be like, oh my God, this is terrible. You know, I mean, we do have the outliers where people have poor appetite in general, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the average. And then in regards to dirty bulk or implementing a lot of junky food or high calorie foods, I do have clients that do that. And those are generally the people that have a hard labor job. They're working physical labor. Their calorie expenditure in the day is insanely high. And or genetically, they're just a lean people. So those people I end up having to have like their baseline diet, and I supplement with dirty food. So usually their dirty meals might be peanut butter and jelly sandwich, peanut butter and banana sandwich, peanut butter and honey sandwich, like maybe an extra 2 per day. So you have an extra 700 calories. And then I might even implement a dirty meal at the last meal of the day. But I never do dirty meals at the beginning of the day because it's going to ruin their appetite for the rest of the meals. They can reset. But I usually do. That's what I usually do. But it's usually titrated up over time. I don't tell somebody, okay, every night this week, have a dirty meal, because that's usually going to trash your digestion. It's going to trash how they feel, and they're not going to want to eat their diet food. But that's a very individual basis. I don't have any one set rule overall, but if I were going to say the best approach is to be under their set point, and manage body fat carefully. Always have some cardio in the off season, because it's very important to train hard, because if you're in good cardiovascular shape, you can train hard, you can recover better. When I say cardio, I'm talking 15 to 20 minutes of a modified interval training maybe 3 days a week. Nothing crazy, but enough to understand aerobic and anaerobic activity in that capacity.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so let's go to the counting macros part. First of all, do you count your macros from every source, or it's just like counting the proteins from the meats, counting the carbs from the carb sources and stuff like that? Because some do it at all, and some counting only the like a direct sources. What are yours?
Yeah, so I do a very hybrid version of all of that. So obviously, contest prep is a different animal. So we'll talk about off season. Now, when someone's eating 1,000 carbs a day, they could be getting an extra 50, 60 grams of protein from those sources, right?
Yeah.
So I do take that into consideration. So I'm not going to have somebody eat 250 grams of meat if they're eating 1,000 carbs a day, right? Because I rather them be able to sustain a faster gastric emptying and be able to digest food better. So I will bring the protein down in the off season sometimes to equate for that. So generally, I'm not a high protein pusher anyway. I'm not at all. So when people look at my plan, sometimes like, whoa, this is protein's way less than I'm used to eating. Like I don't have people eating 400 grams of protein a day. I never, ever do. Unless it's a contest prep under certain situations, but I never will do that. I usually will like to have, because my thought process as being a dietitian and understanding nutrition is the fact that you have this group of bro science being like thermal effect of proteins high. Let's keep protein insanely high because that's all we really need. We'll bottom out these macros over here so the calories can be equated for more protein. We'll lose less muscle mass and we'll just push hard into prep. My thought process is like, well, if we have all this excess protein and we're not eating and we have carbs and fats really low, you're missing essential fatty acids, you're missing fiber, micronutrients, electrolytes, and everything that's going to come into these other foods. So I rather lower the protein and still keep some of these other macros in there to maximize training performance. But I generally don't count, like I'm not going to count protein grams and carbs and vegetables, right?
Yeah.
I just don't. I will consider the protein amount in a total carbohydrate load if we're getting really high. In contest prep, I tend to be straight macros. I give people a distinct meal plan, but when I'm calculating it for myself, I'm not counting 5 grams of protein that's in rice in contest prep. I'm counting it from more the complete sources. Off season, I tend to follow more of a hybrid version.
Okay. And if you are more like a lower protein guy, so how many grams of protein from the direct source you like to give you guys per 1 kilo of a body mass? Because in Poland we count it for
Yeah, I'm
kilos.
gonna be doing kilos. Hold on, I'll tell you right now. So for a 90 kilogram or 91 kilogram bodybuilder who's reasonable body fat, I'll do probably about 2.8 to 3 grams per pound. Per kilogram.
Okay.
If we're like in prep, but I would modify that if I have to. That would be like a starting point, right? And then I might modify it from that point. I really never almost go above 325 grams of protein with almost anybody. Again, unless there's specific situations.
Yeah.
And be honest with you, I haven't seen the benefit. Like, sometimes people will there'd be dogmatic processes and calculations in bodybuilding of what we all fall into, right? We're recommended. But over the years of prepping people, I've had to take people's protein down for a relatively low level in contest prep. And I saw 0 muscle loss and I saw 0 strength loss. Obviously, they're on a lot of androgens, but regardless, if protein was that detrimentally important to keep it sky high, I would have saw a flat physique. I would have seen loss of muscle, loss of strength, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And it's a regular practice with me. If I get somebody that's a little more difficult to get in shape and I don't want to go zero carb because I want to protect their training performance, I will lower protein. I will lower protein. If that 91 kilogram bodybuilder, I will lower their protein all the way down to 200 grams. And I have not seen ill effects whatsoever. I've seen more ill effects with a physique when their fats are too low and their carbs are too low than protein being too high. Because ultimately, if performance disappears, their body disappears.
Yeah, and the questions that many ask, do you think that PEDs and peptides like GH, for example, insulin, have like some role in the, because obviously if you are more if you have more androgens in your body, like protein synthesis is ramped up. That's a normal thing. But some says that if they are ramped up, that actually you need less protein to use it for a better. And some says that if it's ramp up, you need more, just because the processing the protein is quicker in your body. And what's in your opinion are the right way?
All right. One, we do know that research supports that the older you get, the more protein you need because your body doesn't utilize it as well. We know that for a fact. 21-year-old versus a 41-year-old. 41-year-old is going to need more protein than a 21-year-old to grow. We know that. So we'll get that out of the way. And that there's scientific literature supporting that. Now, in regards to androgens, my mind used to be more on the lines of, well, if we have gear, we're going to be absorbing everything better. Everything's going to be better, so we need more. I don't believe that anymore because, as you know, if you took a 21-year-old boy who's been weight training for a year and you put him on 1,500 calories and you give him 100 mg of Anadrol a day, he's going to gain weight and he's going to get stronger. Well, how is that possible on 1,500 calories? Gear makes your body have a much better positive partitioning effect with the nutrients you have. Better nitrogen balance. It changes how your gene expression works. So I do believe you get more gas mileage for the protein when you're using gear. I firmly believe that.
Okay.
To what degree, I'm not sure. And this is my opinion. I don't have science to back this up. This is just more anecdotally what I've seen. I just haven't seen it. Like I haven't seen a situation where I'm like, all right, you're starting gear now and we're going to increase your protein. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, mind blown. He's growing like crazy. And then versus somebody who's like, oh, I'm eating only 220 grams of protein a day. Don't you think we should up it? No. And they grow consistently how they would normally should grow. You know what I mean? So I just haven't seen it. If I saw that direct relationship response, I would say differently.
Okay. That's sufficient for me because actually I don't think that anyone has the data because I think there is no data about that because let's be honest, nobody gonna do like a exam for a guy who taking like a 2000 milligram of tests just to see how
that would not be ethical.
yeah and no one will pay for that. So okay, so we have the protein, so it's like probably the most important thing. But what about the fats and carbs? Because I see the trends that in the US, you as a coaches like the more fat approaches. Because here in Poland, for example, you see a lot of coaches that's actually doing an almost zero, like a direct fat sources, and even using more like a lean cut of meats than something like a beef or salmon or stuff like that. So it's very low in fats. Sometimes it's even less than like a half gram per kilo. And in the US, especially right now, where when I'm working with a DOM, I see that tends to like a more fat approach. So I have like a red meat in my diet. I have a lot of eggs. I have like a salmon every day and stuff like that. So it's definitely higher in fats. In my opinion, I feel much better. But what's your way when it comes to those stuffs?
All right. So listen, I understand, for those who are listening, I understand the approach and the ideology of being very, very low fat and having most of your calories come from carbs and protein, because their thought process is, we need protein, we need carbohydrates to spike insulin, store glycogen, and fuel our body. The thermal effect of protein and carbs is greater than fat. And since we're on androgens and we're not natural, we don't need X number of dietary fat to stay hormonally sound. So we can just jam these foods to the roof and get the best outcomes. That's the ideology behind it. I don't agree with that ideology at all. I am a fat guy. I mean, partially anecdotally, I can go zero carb and have a decent amount of fat in my diet and feel awesome. If I go very, very low fat and actually have even 400 grams of carbs in a day, I feel horrible, horrible. So I also am a dietitian. So like, I understand the requirement and need for a certain level of dietary fat for inflammatory purposes, for flavor, for taste. I mean, geez, you can eat 1,000 grams of carbs a day and 300 grams of protein and then have no fat. It's going to be harder to get the food down, right? Very hard. And then you're going to rely on condiments and sauces. Then you're going to get reflux, and it's a disaster. So I know there is a requirement and need for having some level of dietary fat in the diet. So that's my education. And I have my anecdotal evidence myself with knowing how I feel in low fat and high fat. Now, when it comes to low fat, high fat with individual people, my clients, I have gone the low fat approach. I have, but it's an individual basis on what I need to do to get that person to perform their best or control their appetite the best. However, I'm by no means defined as an individual that does trace fats ever. I never do that. Because let's be honest, right? Chicken is basically nutrient denseless. It's just protein. Yeah. There is some micronutrients, but you have red meat, you have salmon, you have whole eggs, which are gram for gram the most versatile source of food you can get because of all the micronutrients that are in them. And if you're getting more bang for your buck for your meat in regards to what it can do for your body and replenish it, the better you're going to be. I mean, you know, when people say, oh, when I get a cheat meal in dirty bulk, I feel so good and feel so strong. You're just consuming a mass quantity of fat, salt, cholesterol, carbohydrates, and usually a burger and fries is protein's the least dominant macronutrient in that meal. So people are like, oh, it's the burger, it's a cheat meal. No, you're giving your body kind of somewhat what's missing. And if you're getting this type of response every single time you have a cheat meal in the off season, then your baseline diet might be a little off here. You know what I mean? So again, it's individual, but by no means am I a low fat person. And I think fats are extremely important. I mean, I have to say most of the time, if fat gets too low with a client, they're in prep, their fatigue is high. And if I take some of their protein and their carbs away and I bring fat back and it's the same calories, they usually feel better. They're usually, wow, I feel better. And then, of course, you get the psychological with people where they look at food and they're like, oh my God, this is so low carb. I'm not going to be able to survive on this. And it's more calories than it was to begin with because they added fats. You know, you have that psychological effect. But fats are important. I do keep them. And I think they're essential to keeping joint pain down, like olive oils, avocados, avocados to a certain degree because they can become digestive issues if you have too much. But olive oils, macadamia nut oil, things like that, those are key, especially in the off season, getting a lot of food down. Like you can eat 400 grams of rice, just plain white rice, or like adding a little coconut oil or avocado oil or mac oil. It helps it go down much easier.
Yeah, definitely. Now I see it. After all of the years that I was pretty much a low fat guy, and right now I'm doing it totally opposite way, and I feel much better, much better. Yeah. Okay, so do you fluctuate your calorie intakes during the week? So, for example, like a slightly carb cycles, like a training days are higher and non-training days are lower.
I used to do non-training days and training day diet. And now I do that less and less in the off season. And I actually will follow a carb cycle. Carb cycle might be, for example, these are examples because everybody's a little different. where Thursday, Wednesday, and Friday might be very, very high calorie, high carbohydrate. And the rest of the days are either at baseline or slightly above baseline, just slightly. Because if we're in a surplus constantly all the time, you're going to create what? Excessive body fat gain, loss of appetite, digestion's going to falter. You're going to lose pumps, lose insensitivity. So you got to be able to keep that insensitivity higher. So implementing some days, even I have where I go down to carbs, 200 grams of carbs a day, and they will be in a deficit that day, and there'll be higher fats to help that digestion rest, help that appetite come back, and keep insensitivity alive. I will carb cycle, I guess you could say carb cycle, one way or another in off season and contest prep 90% of the time. If I ever are on linear calories where calories are the same every day, it's because I'm trying to establish someone's baseline, or I'm trying to crush their glycogen down and create a hole of fatigue before I feed them in a prep. So those are only two ways I'll do linear calories now. I used to be very specific with always doing specific training days and non-training days all the time, or linear calories. And I found out that it's just not optimal when someone's in the off season for 9 months. It's like, they come out of the hole strong, they're motivated, everything's great. And then you get 4 months into the off season, they hit a hole, they don't get good pumps, lethargic, they can't sleep well. So ultimately carb cycling in the off season is to prevent that.
Okay. You said about being in a off season for 9 months. So do you incorporate like a mini cuts when it's needed, or do you schedule them? For example, you assuming that we're gonna do a 6 weeks of like a calorie blast, and then we do like a 2 weeks of mini cuts or stuff like that.
Tentatively, you can make that plan, but just as you know, when you're prepping somebody, you can't possibly predict where they're going to be at 4 weeks out. So I might say to them, I tell them a tentative plan, be like, okay, we have an 18-week cycle we're going to run, max, minimum 12 weeks. The length of that cycle will be dependent on your gains, you're injured or not, or whatever, but that's going to be our cycle. We might have to pull back at some point, but I don't know when, because if you're growing, I'm not going to pull back, right? If everything's going well, I'm not changing anything. But if things aren't going well, and say the individual is suffering from poor appetite, or somehow we're starting to put on a little more body fat, or their mind is not in it, then I will pull them back, because nobody's mind's going to jump into that super motivated state with high calories and feeling sluggish all the time. So I might implement a cut beforehand. But now let me tell everybody this, like, when I define a mini cut in the off season, I'm not trying to pull 15 pounds of body fat off. Right? I'm more or less not looking for a number of body fat pounds to come off or kilograms to come off. I'm more looking for response of that person to tell me, I'm hungry, I have high energy, I feel great, I'm motivated to get back into the gym, I'm getting great pumps again, I'm feeling good. And then I'll probably go 1 more week where I bring their calories down a little bit more, and then I go back up again. So I'm more or less looking to his response, because a driving response is training, performance, motivation, digestion, appetite. That's what I want. I really don't want them to get fat. And if they are fat, I don't want to waste 8 weeks of like really driving calories low and peeling off 15 pounds of body fat if I don't have to. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. If somebody comes to me and they're already fat, that's a different story. But like, if we're in a good spot in the get-go in that cycle, then, I'm open to that. And those are on the table as tools, but I don't want to have to go to a spot where we're peeling off 10, 15 pounds of body fat in a mini cut. More or less, you're bringing calories down, and almost you could say a recomposition phase, right? Because if gear's still in the body and you're bringing calories lower and their performance starts to increase, you're going to see a body composition change for the good.
And what about the cheat meals? You say that briefly, but some people are incorporated the cheat meals like every often. So, for example, every 2 weeks or every week, or for some it's like a mental clearance, because some guys need like a mental break from their diets and stuff like that. For some, it's just like for example, when you periodize your week, like and schedule the one day for lagging body parts, for example. Some coaches do them in those days, do them cheat meals, and for some it's just like a, I don't know, like a fun activity, just to keep them in a good position mentally. So, what are your thoughts about cheat meals? Are they
Okay.
necessary or
Yeah.
not?
So off season, are they necessary for everybody? No. I've had clients in the past tell me they prefer not to, but they like to at home once a week make a big salmon meal with mustard dill sauce and have a large plate of rice and then eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Sure. Sure. You know what I mean? Then you get people that love to eat out. And typically the driving factor of a cheat meal in the off season is to have some type of normalcy, because most people are not robotic in bodybuilding. Now that social media has invented this large wave of people of competing because it's a thing to do, you get a lot of people who don't have that old school hardcore mentality where they're okay with that and they need to have meals off plan. So in the off season, I do allow usually anywhere from 2 to 3 meals off plan within reason. I tell them you can't binge eat. This is not order a large pizza and eat a huge jug of ice cream. That's not a cheat meal. That's inappropriate. That should not be consumed ever. It's more like you're going out and you're having some sushi. You're going to go out and you're going to have a steak dinner where you have a baked potato, some dinner rolls, you share a dessert, you have a steak, unmeasured. Or you're going to go out and you're going to do breakfast meal. You're going to have an egg white omelet, home fries, toast, a couple pancakes, something like that. If they're not getting fat and they're maintaining their digestion, their appetite, I'm cool with that. If they're not, I start to pull them back or change and adjust those cheat meals. I no longer tell people, do whatever you want 3 days a week. I don't do that, because one person's idea of one cheat meal is one thing and another is totally another, right? Now in contest prep, in the off season, you have to maintain that positive relationship with food, because a lot of times people are very restricted. They hold food on a pedestal. And if they do that, they start to binge eat. And we want to refrain from that poor relationship with food to maintain that going in. And then as contest prep, I really don't implement cheat meals. I more or less have control of the high days, unless they're way ahead. And I'm like, I have a client the other day, he's way ahead. Striated glutes peeled to the bone, he's 5 weeks out. And, and I'm looking at his physique. I'm like, dude, we're going to diet break the entire week. We're going to bring your calories way up, cardio down, go have a burger and fries today. You know what I mean? And then I can just take a look at his physique the next day to see what it even did to him. And the next day, he just gets harder and fuller. So that's a rare instance where I do that. But generally, I don't, because it's hard to control in the contest setting. But that's my idea on cheat meals. But it's really, you have to define it very closely to that individual, or make modifications. If someone says to me, Chris, I love ice cream, I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to be eating Ben and Jerry's. We're probably going to be doing like some sort of slow churned ice cream, where it's probably almost half the calories as your Ben and Jerry's. It's still real ice cream, and you're going to portion out at home yourself versus going out to a ice cream place and getting this humongous sundae.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about PEDs, because that's actually something that's probably like a overdose when it comes to the off season, because obviously when you're in contest prep, the amount of the stuff you take are growing. That's something that you can't like skip, because this is how it is. But in the off season, I see that people tend to think that the PEDs will actually make them grow, and sometimes I think it's actually opposites, because the more stuff you put in your body, the more toxic you are, the less appetite you have, the less everything on a cellular level are working worse. So, what's your opinion about like a perfect PED cycle for contest prep. Maybe not when it comes to the doses, but maybe to the compounds and like a average for a
Yeah.
100 kilo guy.
Yeah. I 110% agree with you. Obviously, we all used to think the opposite because it's human nature to always think more is better. Well, if that guy's bigger than me, he's got to be taking double what I'm taking, right? That's the mentality. And until somebody's gained a lot of experience, they will never, ever grasp that fully until they experience it themselves, because we've all been there. I agree. I think the androgen load, one, needs to start at a minimum in the off season. Whatever that minimum is based on usually that individual's past history to a degree. If they were already an abuser running 1,500 mgs a test a week, 800 mgs a deca, well, we got a problem here, right? And they're cruising on 500 mgs a test. That's a problem. Now their body's so used to a higher androgen load, they're not going to respond very well at all with anything. So that person, I would bring them down to 100 mgs, 150 mgs a test, cypionate or nethate per week, and keep them there for like 12 weeks. And then titrate the dose back up again. So typically the compounds I feel that have the most merit in the off season, your test base, a DHT derivative, Masteron or Primo, and then Norandrolone, DECA or NPP. And I tend to be moderate with test, moderate to high with the DHT, and lower on the Norandrolones, just because a lot of the side effects associated with Norandrolones, because then people have to take Caber and they have gyno issues. But I just don't see, even though Norandrolones are awesome at building muscle, I just haven't seen it be so positive with a large number of people. So starting somebody very low, when I say low, I'm talking 150 milligrams a week of NPP, right? That might be their starting dose of the cycle. And then their testosterone might be 600 milligrams. And then their Masteron might be, or Masteron Primo might be 300 or 400 milligrams. Now, this is them coming from 150 TRT, if that's what they were doing between cycles. And then the dose would titrate up based on the person's response, or every 4 to 6 weeks, and then titrate up based on the response. If they're growing and they're getting better, I'm not changing it. I have failed to see this humongous difference in growth by just taking large quantities of gear. I just haven't seen it. Some of the people that I've known who've taken large quantities of gear, honestly, are dead. I'm dead serious. Never even made it to a heavyweight class, and they're taking 2,000 milligrams a week of testosterone, and they're a middleweight, and they haven't grown. So it's like, it's not dose dependent. There's more factors, like you said, toxicity, digestion, how they're operating, how they're sleeping, the recovery. I don't think as many androgens are needed in the off season to grow as there are androgens at a higher level needed in contest prep to kind of maintain that muscle hardness, muscle performance as you're becoming in a depleted state. But that's my philosophy on that. I do think that the components of growing muscle really are a moderate androgen level, proper sleep, proper digestion, maintaining appetite, keeping insensitivity high, and of course the correct training stimulus. Those all need to be there together. Too many people emphasize just more food, more gear. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is when they start gear in a cycle, they automatically go, I'm like a superhero now, I can train harder. And then they start out of the gate going into the gym, I can recover now, I'm ready, I'm back on, time to train, trying to train harder. And then by week 4, they're fatigued, they're flat, they're tired, and they're like, I think my gear's bunk. I need more gear. We have to up the gear. I need a cheat meal. And no, it's because now you're overtraining. Your body you're not on top of that recovery standpoint. And I tell them, dude, just back off training. Do me a favor, back off training. And all of a sudden, week 5, week 6, they're like, dude, I feel amazing now, because they're staying on top of it. If you match stimulus with recovery, you'll grow and grow and grow, I believe. A couple of my bodybuilders I have who are the biggest are not on any more gear than, say, a middleweight that I have. You know what I mean? They're walking on the offseason at 280 pounds, and they're not taking more gear than a light heavyweight or a middleweight. You know what I mean? It's just now things are their food's way different, but how they just format their training is a lot different, because people don't understand too, is as you get bigger, you do recover slower. because you're lifting way heavier loads, which is requiring a lot more taxing on your body versus somebody's first year at bodybuilding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you say something about keeping your digestion on point, and this is the one topic I especially want to talk with you, because you're a specialist in when it comes to this. And actually, I see a lot of people that have struggle with the problems with the GA track, and I would say that most of them are have the problems to abandon the foods that are actually making the causes the problem. But for all of those people that actually can skip the foods that's making them like a gassy or bloated or stuff like that, because most of the time it's dairy, especially in Poland, because dairy is actually very cheap, and most of the people like it because we are eating lots of dairy from the childhood, so we are used to it. But I think the 8 out of 10 people have a problem, even if it's not like a lactose intolerance. It's something in this dairy. I don't know if it's the production factor or stuff like that, but something in the dairy that actually causes the problem when it comes to bloating, when it comes to the feeling full all day and stuff like that. What are your like maybe like a quick fix or stuffs to avoid, or maybe
Oof.
a few tips to keep your digestion on point in off
All right.
season?
I'll try to educate everybody so they can kind of individualize their problem. So digestion issues in bodybuilding is a multifaceted thing. It's not usually directed towards one thing, although sometimes an individual might be consuming something that's causing a problem. All right. So one thing you have is people in bodybuilding tend to fall toward what is convenient. So when food's convenient, food becomes repetitious. When it becomes repetitious, it limits variety. When you limit variety over long periods of time, you start to starve the gut microflora of prebiotics and things it needs to maintain healthy bacteria levels. So that's a huge driving factor. 2, when you're consuming large quantities of food and you're stressing your digestive system, you're putting strain on the digestive system. So now your digestive system is working overtime all of the time. When you combine lack of variety of food with a large quantity of food with no break, if anything is about to crack, kind of like the straw that put the camel's back, those two are going to crack that. And if you have a predisposition to poor digestion or digestive issues in your family, it's going to come out. If your family has IBS and you never did, and you run a bodybuilding diet, IBS symptoms are going to come out right away. The third is using stimulants, pre-workouts, and overtaxing your central nervous system with heavy, heavy lifts and not recovering. If you're training really heavy with squats or spinal loading movements, you're going to overstimulate your central nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system side. When you overstimulate your sympathetic nervous system, you directly affect your digestion. That's why if you run and exert yourself hard, you usually throw up because your body goes, I need this blood to go somewhere else. You're in that flight-fight response, and your body regurgitates that food in the stomach because it can't push any sort of focus on digestion. So that's why a lot of top endurance athletes have digestion issues, because their body's pushed to the max. So you have that component. And the fourth component you have is people adding problematic foods, which is usually what people think is going on. They go, it's gluten, it's dairy, it's onion, it's garlic, it's broccoli, it's Brussels sprouts, it's too much eggs, it's too much sulfur-containing foods. So those are all the components of digestion. Now, typically, the very first thing I'll look at if someone's having digestion problems, I go, what type of condiments are you using in spices? Do your spices have dried garlic, dried onion in them? They go, oh, yeah, I use garlic, salt, and everything. Well, that's the first thing I'm going to pull, right? Second, I'll look at other foods in the diet. Are you eating foods repetitiously, such as cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower? Yes, we're going to pull those out. I don't have any dairy in the diet at all in a contest prep or off season, unless they request it. And if I do, it's in a very small amount, like Fahe yogurt. I might do like maybe 170 grams, so they can mix some whey protein in it and some rice cereal or something. But other than that, I really don't, for that exact reason. Lactose, as much as someone might not be lactose intolerant, it just doesn't digest as well in a state where the digestive system's overwhelmed with a lot of food. So I just leave it out and just not even bother. But those are the things that kind of bother people, right? If they're eating too much wheat, it's not that they're gluten intolerant, but a lot of wheat proteins don't digest very well and can cause inflammation in the intestinal tract. So I usually will look at what they're doing. Hey, are you consuming Ezekiel bread? Are you eating like 10 pieces a day? Because again, people fall back to the convenience and they start to use foods that are easy to use and utilize without putting effort into their food. So look at wheat proteins. I look at garlic, onion, the condiments, the dry spices, the cruciferous vegetables, and I'll look at egg content. Where are you having this gas and digestive issues? When are you having it? Well, I tend to have it after meal 2. Right after meal 2? Yeah. What's meal 2? Chicken, rice, green beans. That's not a problem. What are you having meal 1? Oh, I have 400 grams of egg whites. Ooh, 400 grams of egg whites. We're going to try to pull the egg whites out for 72 hours and see if we can eliminate that issue. So that's when I try to individually address what is going on if they're eating any trigger foods. But usually sometimes it's a multifaceted thing. And if someone's digestion's really bad, like they're shitting mucus, they're having constant gas or bloating after every single meal, then their gut microflora is off, their pH in the stomach is off, they probably got reflux going on, and their digestive system is just an utter mess. So in that situation, I usually pull back calories. I implement what I call my reflux diet. And then I start to look at more specific foods to restoring their gut microflora, which is slowly bringing in prebiotic-rich foods, which are higher fiber foods, which obviously, as you know, you change fiber content to any degree, and somebody might have increased gas. So whenever you're reincorporating fiber into the diet, it's got to be slow. Every 5 days, you increase. You can't just be like, oh my God, you're only 10 grams of fiber a day. Let's go to 50. They're going to be a mess.
Okay. I think that covers everything, man. That was very good. I hope that it's gonna help a lot of people. It's definitely gonna help me because I see some things that I might do better. So definitely gonna use it. Thank you. What do you think about the GH and insulin in the off season? Is there a need to ramp it up high or use it at all, or it's not necessary in your opinion?
Again, I'm forming a lot of this opinion on myself anecdotally, and some of my friend bodybuilders who are much better bodybuilders than me and their use of insulin and what they've found, and obviously with clients. And I generally think that insulin's misunderstood. I think insulin is something that needs to be deployed when insulin resistance is present, as in you're actually seeing increasing in trend of fasting blood glucose rising over time, or you're seeing postprandial blood glucose rising over time. Then Humulin R or low dose Lantus to help combat and maintain that proper glycemic control will be warranted. I know Milos is totally different, and a lot of people are different, but I just don't see merit to doing like 60 units of Lantus and flooding the body of insulin and slamming carbohydrates, because what I've seen is people who do that is they put on all this mass in the off season, and then when they diet down, they're basically the same again, because they're just super physiologically smoked out with glycogen and water from the insulin, the growth, and the extreme carbohydrate intake, that it's not really true muscle mass. And plus, a lot of people will drive up a lot of body fat with insulin use incorrectly. Insulin, I do believe, should be used to combat a problem that's occurring within the body through growth hormone use, such as loss of insulin sensitivity, and you're actually seeing insulin resistance present. I barely use insulin with, I almost none of my clients are on insulin. A couple of them will do it to maintain the glycemic control, but vast majority of the time, it's just they're getting chubby, they're getting watery. I just don't think it's warranted. Now with the availability of metformin and berberine and carb cycling in the off season, you can pretty much combat a lot of that insulin resistance associated with growth. And the other thing about growth is I think sometimes people use too much, not to mention, or they're not using real growth, because let's be honest, anybody listening who's used pharmaceutical grade growth, using 6IUs, I can't even close my hand. Like the side effects of real growth hormone is horrible. I feel horrible. I'm tired. My joints hurt and my hands are just fat sausages and they're numb. So usually the dose that I've personally used in the off season, I could never go past is 5.4 IUs, and I couldn't stay on it indefinitely. Contest prep's a little different. You can tend to use a little more growth, maybe 6 IUs, but other than that, I don't think anything more of that is required to continue growth. I just don't.
Do you think there is some guys that actually like immune to the side effect of the growth hormone? Because I use the same as my clients or my friends, and some of them have actually very bad side effects using a 5 I use, and the most I used was 15, and I have no side effects at all. They can't even, like you said, close their hands. They woke up, they can't sleep just because their hands are numb all day. They can't drive the car because their hands are numb, and I feel nothing, to be honest.
I mean, if you're
No,
using the same growth, the same company, everything, and that's happening to you, I'd be very interested to see what your serum levels of IGF-1 are if you're having that same response. Do you know what I mean? Like, say if they were running
yeah,
5 IUs and you're running 5 IUs and you check their IGF-1 response and you check your IGF-1 response if you're even having one. Because
yeah,
what if there's a possibility that you're not responding in a positive benefit to that as in somebody else's? You know what I mean?
yeah. But if they're actually IGF serum level are something that we should look up for, because the more like interesting one for bodybuilding should be like a muscle IGF-1 concentration, not the serum one, I think. Yeah, am I right or not? Because actually,
I haven't
stuffs
heard of
like
that. It
yeah,
doesn't mean
this
it's yeah.
yeah, the stuffs like Tren, for example, are actually increased the muscle IGF-1 concentration, especially when you combine with like a GH and Lantus, for example. So that's the tricks that some people use. Because I was making like a trial for myself when combining Atlantis with GH, and it's raises the serum level of the IGF, but I don't think it's something that gave you an advantage when it comes to the building muscle or burning fat or stuff like that, because that's irrelevant, I think, when it comes to the serum level.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I mean, I know too. You know this person too. He's a very top bodybuilder. Doesn't compete anymore, and he ran 15 IU's of Serostim, and he said he felt awful, but he said he didn't really see any benefit. There was no like additional benefit above 6 to 8 IU's that he was using before. I mean, it is certainly possible. It's not common for sure for somebody to use and feel nothing. Like if I take 2 IU's, say today, within 3 days, I can feel my fingers fatter, and the scale weight will go up right away.
Yeah,
And then on those,
don't get me wrong. I feel the retention of
oh, okay, okay,
minerals and the water sub Q. Yeah, I feel it on like when you're grabbing something, you feel like
swollen hands.
yeah, like they are full of water, but it's not something that bothers. It's not something that hurts. It's not something that like a carpal syndrome or stuff like that. There's nothing out there. I don't have the numbness and stuff like that. It's only like you feel a little chubby, and that's all. Yeah,
Yeah.
because so,
Did you get
so
lethargic? Did you get lethargic?
it's hard to say because I using it on a contest prep. So I was first of all lean,
Oh,
and I was not eating a lot of carbs, and I was on a clan and stuff like that. So you see that's everything's built up, so you cannot actually find out what caused what. Yeah.
well,
So
you know what's funny though is like I just said, I can tolerate, I don't have any numbness in my hands when I'm in a contest prep, but in the off season, that's when it comes. So I know a lot of people will tolerate much higher doses of growth in a contest prep. Like you just said, your lower calories, lower body fat, you're exercising, your cardio, you got thermogenics in there. So there's some of those side effects are offset for sure.
Yeah, right now I'm on 8, like an 8.25 I use a day and still feel nothing. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, that is amazing. Dude, I remember trying to crack an egg and the egg falling out of my hand because I didn't know I was holding an egg. Like my hands were just completely toast.
I have a lot of clients that actually taking like a 4 to 6 IU and they have the same problem. So that's always like a mind blowing for me because I never had that. So sometimes it's hard to even give them like a good way to fix it because yeah you can like check your B vitamins and stuff like that because sometimes that's like with a nerve helping with the nerves and stuff like that, but that's not something that I think helps even if a slightest way when you have a problem that you can sleep. So
Right.
the only way I think the only way is just to lower your dose or skip it
Agree.
totally because yeah, it's nothing
Agree.
you can do.
Yeah, you remove it and then you start back again.
Yeah, slowly. That's important. Not like a remove for 3 days and then ramp up to 10.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Okay, so have you have like a time?
Oh, what time is
Because
it? I have no idea. What time is it? Do you know?
it's 6, almost 6:20 p.m.
So we've been going
4:20 p.m.
4:20. So we've been going for hour 20. I can go another 30. Go another 30.
Okay. So let's talk about the transition to the prep mode because
Okay.
some guys do it rapidly. So like you cut like let's say 3 of the fourth of your calories or like even half of the calories for the start of the contest prep, and then you maybe slowly ramp it up uh, or you're not. Some
Yeah.
starting with a lot of cardio and some doing it very slowly. And the other question is how many weeks you actually uh, gave to your clients if you're not knowing his body because you're working with him for the first time. So what amount of time you think is necessary for someone who has a great off season? So he's not a fat buster. He's like in a good position mentally, hormonally, body fat wise, and he's not like overtrained and stuff like that. 16 weeks, 20 weeks, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, how much?
So I don't know this person's body.
No, because you're
Yeah.
working with him. You kind of know because he's been with you for the whole off season. But
Okay.
see,
I see what you're saying.
yeah,
I see what you're saying. You're saying he was working with me when the off season.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
And that standpoint, probably 16 to 18 weeks. Now people get afraid when they say that. It's like, oh my God, prep for 16 to 18 weeks. No, I usually I call it a pre-prep, where you're bringing calories down to near maintenance, because as many people might know that you have your body metabolically adapts either way, right? So it's like sometimes in the off season you're eating, you're gaining, and all of a sudden you keep adding food and you're not gaining anything, right? Well, your body's metabolically adapts one way. It can also metabolically adapt the other, where you go lower. Well, you can't just go lower linearly and expect to get shredded. It doesn't work that way, right? So I try to find that point where they can lose, but they're not losing. See what I'm saying? So they're in that maintenance holding phase, or however you want to term it, for a period of time before the actual prep. That way I have a full grasp, because many contest prep coaches know that sometimes pulling somebody from off season to prep there's a lag period before their body starts to actually respond, right? You look in your mind, you're like, they have 1,000 carbs in their diet. Oh, if I pull off 300 grams of carbs and add 20 minutes of cardio, they should lose a bunch of weight this week. And then you do that and nothing happens, right?
Or the weight are raising actually.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get over all that before the actual prep. So, I mean, and sometimes you get those people that you just change 100 grams of carbs a day from their off season and they're losing body fat, right? But most people don't. So I usually enter a pre-prep stage to kind of get a real idea of where their body is. At that point in time, gear is not high at all. Gear might be 600 mgs a test or 400 mgs a test, something just, above super physiological, above your normal doses, normal serum levels, and training's consistent, normal, managing fatigue, your body feels good, you're adjusting the calories as you see fit, bringing them down, appetite starting to increase. Cardio might be still very low, maybe 20 minutes, 4 days a week, something like that, just to get an idea of where they are, get their body ready. So when I immediately cut and change, I have a positive outcome that first week. Yeah. I don't want to get to that week where I'm like, all right, it's time to prep. And you prep and you're like, weight goes up or weight stays the same. When I'm ready to prep and I start to cut the switch, flip the switch, knowing that I want body fat to come off, it should be coming off, not being like, oh crap, it didn't come off this week. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So usually 16 to 18 weeks. The longest person I prepped, Jordan, I don't know if you know my client, he won USA championships last year, got his pro card. We prepped for 24 weeks, but he had a great deal of body fat. We started around 280 and then he was on stage at 226 pounds.
Oh.
So he had a good amount of body fat to lose. He got peeled, but we had to do it carefully. You know what I mean? Yes. And we had to implement a diet break, to break up the fatigue and get the body back to normal. But that's usually what I do for prep. I've had taken people on sooner, with a little less time, which I don't like to do. And most of the time I regret it. When someone's like, no, I can get ready in 12 weeks. I'm like, dude, I don't know anything about your body. Like, this is stressful. I know, I promise I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm like, I know you'll do whatever it takes, but your body might not be ready to respond that quickly. You know what I mean? I took a men's pro guy, this guy Patrick from Canada, I think around 14 weeks out, or maybe a little bit, around 15. And he was in a bad place to begin with a previous coach. And I'm like, dude, you're already doing that low of calories and you're already doing like an hour cardio. I'm like, dude, this is not a good position to be in. But we made best of it, and we ended up pulling it off, and he looked fine. He looked great. So that's what I don't want to do. I don't want to stress myself out as a coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So tell me, how's the training changing the contest prep? Is it changing at all, or you're not doing nothing? Because some wants to ramp the training volume by doing more drop sets or just more volume in general, just to burn some more calories, and some doing it opposite way. So the less calories you have, the less your recovery capabilities are. So the logic says that you probably should do less than do more, just because you are not in the best position when it comes to recovery. So what's your opinion about this?
Yeah, so my opinion on this is just what you said. I think personally, ramping up volume, intensity, intensifiers is a huge mistake in a calorie deficit. Driving up fatigue too quickly. I'm about managing fatigue while maintaining calorie deficit and pulling your body weight down. I try to protect training performance as much as I possibly can. So I usually have a pep talk with my clients, and I say this: whatever you're doing training wise right now, do not change a thing. What I mean by that is, don't be trying to add a drop set. Don't be adding an exercise. Don't add an extra day of weight training. Don't go to the gym and start shortening your rest between sets and start being a maniac doing jumping jacks between sets or whatever you think you are, because you got 8 weeks left and you got to be shredded. No. You have to maintain a control variable, and that's the training. I will manipulate the step count, the cardio, and the diet and the gear. Keep the training the same. I don't think it takes a lot to keep muscle in a prep. I think it takes a hell of a lot to gain muscle, which is a different animal. But when it comes to maintaining a calorie deficit, it's got to be consistent. And maintain that recovery, maintaining training performance, managing fatigue is how I do that. And that's the approach I take. Sometimes I do tell them you got to make changes, meaning I don't want you doing barbell row anymore. I want you doing chest supported row because it's driving up too much fatigue. I might tell them, if you're starting to feel really bonked out, I want you to wait a little bit longer rest between sets so you can maintain those loads. When I say more rest, I'm talking 30 seconds. I'm not talking like wait around 5 minutes or anything. I'm just talking like a little bit more rest. Don't because sometimes when in prep, right? You're on clen, maybe on T3, you're kind of amped up and you might jump the gun and shorten your rest between sets without realizing it, right? Yeah. And then you start reducing your loads, not having the ATP replenishment, and then here you are just decreasing the loads lifted over weeks and weeks and weeks, which I don't want. So I first tell them that, and then I will tell them to adjust exercises to less CNS taxing exercises if it's a problem. And then sometimes I'll even implement complete days off, like 2 or 3 days off if they need it. If they drive themselves into a hole and I'm not aware of, I've done that. Or I might reduce their volume by 25%. If they're doing 12 working sets, I'm like, I need you to do 9 working sets. Keep the intensity the same, the loads the same, just reduce the volume for this week until you start to feel better. And then most of the time after like a full week, they're like, dude, I feel better. I feel stronger. And then I'm like, all right, please stay with that volume for now and then move forward. Because usually at that point, someone's like 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, you know? Yeah. And then obviously pressing, I always warn them ahead of time because people always panic when they lose pressing strength. Like pressing strength is usually the first things to go. Yeah. I would just understand that lower body weight is associated with lower pressing strength. So just understand that you lose 20 pounds, you're not going to be at your strongest pressing strength because they start to panic, you know?
Okay, so how does the diet change? Because some say that you should ramp up your protein when you are in the calorie deficit, because that's like a preventing for the muscle loss. And some lowers the fats and keeping the carbs high. Some cut the carbs first. And what's your way of doing it?
When I initially start a contest prep diet, protein is not changing. Unless I lowered carbohydrates so much where they're down 50 grams of protein because I've dropped carbs so much from other sources, right? And that's the case. I rarely do, honestly. At some point, I might bring up protein a little bit more as carbohydrates get lower. But when I say bring up protein more, I'm talking maybe 25, 30 grams. I'm not talking 50 or 100 grams. I just, I know there's different ways of doing things. I just don't do that. I haven't seen the merit to do that. Again, my focus is all maintaining training performance. Whatever those macros might be, if their training performance is on point, they look great and their muscles are full. If their training performance is total shit, they usually look flat and they're in a very fatigued state. So macro manipulation is really going to be motivated by that simple fact. If I have to pull protein down and add carbohydrates around training, that's what I'm going to do. If I look at their dietary fat and they're like 30 grams a day and they're super fatigued, but yet they still have a decent amount of carbohydrates, then I might pull carbs down and protein a little bit and add some fats back for those calories and see if they can get a better outcome of energy. Because as you know, as fatigue increases, we tend to move less. We move less, we expend less calories in a day. Therefore, our total calorie deficit for the week is less, and we're going to lose less body fat. So I try to do that the most. I don't adjust protein higher to any large degree. One thing I do is I actually cut protein way down the week out before the show. Mm-hmm. So they might be, just for example, say they're at 300 grams of protein a day. By carb up day, they might be 150 grams or 180 grams of protein, just because I rather have more carbohydrates and storing glycogen going in. I want their stomach to be very flat and thin because we don't really need protein at that time. Some of it is required, in my opinion, because of slower gastric emptying, better glycemic control. But I want the other carbohydrates in there. And when it's also funny is when I cut people's protein back, start cutting it back 7 days out, they start looking drier, and their stomach looks better, and carbohydrates are going in, and their whole body just looks better and better. And initially, people were like freaking out. They're like, I'm not going to lose muscle, am I? Like, you're not going to lose muscle in a week because calories are starting to go up now. You know, you're going to have that protein sparing effect. But that's really it in regards to protein. I will make sure the sources are really good protein, you know. But again, if carbohydrates and calories overall are from fats and carbs are down, which also means protein's down, I will match the protein increase with meats and stuff from that loss.
Okay. And what's the best time to incorporate like maybe the first question will be better. Okay, let's start again. When is the best time for, in your opinion, to changing the compounds for the more like a dry compounds? So if, for example, like from non-Jolons to more like a DHT derivatives and stuff like that.
Okay. One thing you just reminded me of, I didn't answer one of your questions before, was cheat meals on weak body part days. In off season, cheat meals are the day before a weak body part because I want that food to be utilized to drive positive training. In a contest prep, I will utilize refeeds on days off because I'm trying to restore glycogen and lower fatigue. I don't want training to impede that recovery process and that carbs are required for. I asked that before. Now, in regards to gear protocol in contest prep, I'm actually somebody that likes to titrate the same compounds up over time throughout the 12 weeks. So for me, it's not uncommon to start tren at an insanely low dose 12 weeks out. And then that dose will titrate up over time based on that person's recovery, appearance, and performance. So, for example, if 12 weeks out, 25 milligrams of tren 3 days per week, that might, tren ACE, might be something that would be deployed. And it might not increase until week 6 if I don't need to, or it might go up to 33 milligrams, very small. And I usually never use more than 75 milligrams of tren every other day ever. I just don't see the benefit visually with a client. They, at that point in time, they almost start to need Carb because they start to have a little prolactin in some cases. At DHT derivatives, sometimes I'll wait 10 weeks out. And then the same thing again, I'll titrate that dose up over time. Or the DHT derivatives will overlap. It might start out with Primo for the first 6 weeks and then turn over to Mastron for the last 6 weeks. And then obviously whatever Primo dose was ended at 6 weeks, the Mastron dose would start at. If they didn't have Mastron, they didn't have Primo, then Mastron might start at a very, very low dose, 12 weeks, and then titrate up over throughout the duration of prep based on the same reasons for tren. And then orals goes, that is a wild card. I've started orals as late as early on as 8 weeks out, and I've started them on as late as 4 weeks out. It depends on that individual, what the person can get, right? Their history of anabolic use, like where they used to are using, what their advancement level is, and 2, the response. So typically Anavar might be introduced to 8 weeks out, and then I might keep that all the way through to 4 weeks out, and then I might add oral Winstrol on top of Anavar. But I'm not a huge oral guy. You see a lot of guys pushing 200 grams of oral, 200 milligrams of orals a day. I'm never even close to that. Usually I think that 75, 80 is the max for me. I know some people would disagree, but I just haven't seen it. You know what I mean? Like when someone's on 40 bigs versus 60 versus 80 versus 100, I don't look at them at 60 and look at them at 100 and be like, wow, what a huge difference that was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in most cases, like, I know there's a lot of variables there because you have individual response. And of course you have, is that drug they're taking real? Is it dosed correctly? Yeah. But I haven't seen it. And usually around the 4 weeks out, I might add Winstrol at that point. And then I usually will pull out testosterone 2 weeks out. Sometimes if they're peeled out of their mind and they're full, I ain't dropping shit, right? Because if it's not broke, I'm not fixing it. If I look at their physique and they're like, oh, I can see they're still holding a little bit of water or they need to make a weight, I will remove testosterone completely. And usually injections are usually cut out completely 7 to 10 days out. Again, unless it's a different circumstance where they're so dry and hard and they go flat super easy. Then I'll try to hang on as long as I can and then pull them maybe 3 or 4 days before, provided they're not getting any sort of injection site inflammation at all.
Yeah. And what about GH when we are speaking of the pulling out? If it's needed only or with every guys?
Yeah. So overall, I usually will pull it out 2 to 4 weeks out. I would say on average. There has been situations where I kept it in because I had a guy last year. He was so dry, gnarly, and hard at 3 IUs a day, and I'm like, dude, you're so round and full. Like, we're gonna leave it in, dude. You know what I mean? Because say I pull it out and he flattens out, and I'm trying to carb him up, and now I'm going to be searching for that look. So I kept it in. But I usually will reduce it. Like say if they're in the off season, they're running 6 IUs of growth. They might be 6 IUs of growth at 12 weeks out, but 8 weeks out, I'm bringing it down so I can still have a more accurate look of what they look like water wise. Because I really do try to have my guys ready 3 or 4 weeks out. That way I can feed them into the show and I can reduce cardio and I can get rid of the fatigue. And you can almost do pretty much a total mock-up carb up, not exactly the same as I would do for a show, but at least bring up their carbs to say 600 grams of carbs for 2 days and just look at their look and see what happened. Oh, wow, they look fuller, they look harder. They didn't really gain water. Okay, so like I know at this point in time they're probably not going to respond too negatively to this carb increase above their baseline. I like to have them in that position if I can. It's not always work out that way, but that's what I really try for.
So what's the best time to incorporate the fat burners like Glen, Yohimbine, maybe GH fragment and stuff like that?
Glen, I usually will start 12 weeks out and I might cycle it. And then once they're 6 weeks out, they will be, say if it's like on, off, and then it's off 7 to 6 weeks out. And then 6 weeks out, it might stay on and then just titrate up every week, 10 micrograms. But I never, ever go above, I never see need to go above 80 micrograms with most people. Some people even less, depending if they have good clen. Because, sometimes clen, makes people sleepy, makes people tired. They can sleep on it. And then some people are like cracked out. Like that's me. 40 micrograms of clen for me, and like I'm wide awake constantly, Yohimbine and caffeine I'll utilize usually starting at 12 weeks out. And my thought process behind that is some people will say, well, wait till you get stuck. My thought process is if all these additives can help you increase your overall metabolic rate in a day, and it prevents me from going too low in calories too early, then I can kind of push off that metabolic adaptation as long as I can, right? Yeah. Because if I'm able to use these tools, I want to use them. Because, I don't want to get to the point where I understand people's philosophy on both ends, but I like to use all the stops possible to keep the most amount of food possible, And then one thing I did bring up is step count. I have my clients track their step count in a day. So if they're normally
that's the next question. What do you do about it with the cardio and keeping your guys on track?
So cardio, I rarely ever go above 60 minutes a day with anybody.
Excuse me, it's least cardio, yes? Like a slow, steady state.
I'll get to that. Yeah. So we'll talk about the step count. So first off, I explained to my clients, the amount of calories you burn in a day, NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is everything you burn in a day outside of exercise. And that equates for large calories burned. And I explained to them that I don't care how tired you get in prep. You have to understand, the more tired you get, the less you're going to move. Less you're going to move, less calories you're going to burn, which is ultimately going to lead to me having to increase cardio and decrease calorie intake. We don't want that. We want to maintain that output. So please be mindful of what you're doing in a day. And I'll have them track their steps 3 days in a row, maybe 14 weeks out, and to get at a baseline of where they're at. Okay, they're at 5,500. Okay, 5,500. I need you to maintain 5,500 to 6,000 every day now. No matter what, you have to maintain that. And then I might use that as a tool to increase calorie expenditure later on instead of just adding cardio, because cardio can drive up a lot of fatigue. So usually when I start cardio, I usually will tell them, if you can in your schedule, because we're not all bodybuilders full time, I would like you to separate your cardio from your training. Whether you're training in the morning and doing cardio at night, or doing your cardio in the morning and you're training at night, I want you to separate them. And, 20 to 30 minutes steady state. I rarely do HIIT or interval. I will do it if I have to. If somebody asks me, they go, hey, it's much mentally less fatiguing if I vary my pace, I'll be like, I'm okay with that as long as your average heart rate is here, right? Fasting cardio for me is not required. What is required is for them to get the cardio in with the least amount of fatigue it can generate. Meaning, some people, including myself, when I do fasted cardio in contest prep, it wipes me out for half the day. And then by the time I get to training at night, it's the end of the day, I'm tired. So I learned that it's better for me to eat, weight train, and then do my cardio at the end of the day. And not only that, I'm able to maintain a higher heart rate later, but I'm also physically, mentally tired, and I lose focus when I would weight train at night. So I move my weight training to morning and cardio at night. That way, cardio is just mindless. I can do it, but I get really good, solid training sessions in, because that fasting cardio was hurting my weight training later in the day. I have a recent client. This is a really good story. He was doing fasted cardio, maintaining a high step count, weight training at night. We've been progressing great through this whole prep. And the last 2 weeks, he's like, dude, fatigue's really bad. And I'm looking at his food, looking at his numbers, his rate of progress. And I'm like, dude, I really can't change much of a rate. But what I would suggest is trying to do your cardio after meal one, and then do your weight training later. The following week, he did that. Fatigue went down, and he lost 3 pounds above what he normally lost. And now he's like, dude, I feel better. I'm moving more in a day. I mean, that was a perfect move because a lot of people put too much merit that cardio has to be fasted. It doesn't have to be. And again, fatigue management is number one, provided you're driving the deficit. And then cardio equipment wise, I tell them arc trainer I like the most, because the arc trainer, you can put the incline down, which is less knee flexion, and you can really drive a lot with your glutes and your hamstrings, and you can put the resistance up, and it's low impact, and it's not too mentally taxing. If they're behind, they're going on the stairs. And they will be varying the pace to drive up the calorie burn. There's no way around it at that point. But I don't want to have people behind, of course. But if they get sick, there's a family missing, they miss a week or two of actual progress, and we have to catch up, then I will be implementing things like that. If somebody's stuck and I don't believe they're doing cardio intensely, I'll be like, bro, go on the stairs, level 8, 30 minutes for 3 days. And then they're like, oh my God, that cardio is so hard. I'm like, I knew they weren't pushing the cardio, because we know those people that are like leaning over the machine and they're just doing this, and they're not putting in the calorie burn they need to, and they don't even realize that they're hurting themselves by doing that, because now I'm going to be lowering calories and increasing cardio duration.
Yes, definitely. It's the thing that we spoke lately about the training. With the cardio, it's the same. Some people tends to cheat on their cardio. They doing it, but they actually not.
Yeah.
Or I have some guys that actually counting their cardio as daily activities. So, for example, they normally walk every Sunday to the store, but right now it's contest prep, so they counted it like for half of their cardio because it was 30 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
No. Walking their dog.
Yeah.
Their heart rate's like 100 beats per minute. I'm like, that's not cardio.
Yeah. So that's those guys. Okay, so we have a peak week. You mostly answered like a half of the questions from here. So, like a cut GH, cut the test, or lower it. But how long before show you start to level up the water and sodium intake for your clients? And just to make sure that you understand me correctly, because my English actually sucks, there's a period I do it that way. For example, like 2 weeks out, I tell my guys to keep the water in the certain amounts and the salt in the certain amounts, just because when we go to the like a peak weeks or 7, 8 weeks before the days before the show, I'm gonna ramp it up by, let's say, it's 20%, 25%. So just for them to know how much it is.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll give you the rundown. So I do the same exact thing. At 2 weeks out, I go, listen, you need to standardize your sleep schedule. You need to standardize your water intake. You need to standardize your salt intake. And you need to know exactly what you're doing so we know what to change later on. And that will be consistent through 14-day to 7-day. And to be honest with you, depending where their water is, I might not change salt or water at all at first. So I'll give you 2 quick examples. I had one guy, and I'm like, dude, you're getting leaner. You have striated glutes, but you look filmy, like you're taking Anadrol or something. I go, how much salt are you actually taking? And he goes, you're going to measure it out? I'm like, you didn't measure it out. He was taking like 16 grams a day.
That's
and I'm
nothing.
like, dude, this is way too much. I go,
I got a guy who takes a 30.
What?
30 grams of salt. Yeah.
Oh my
And I have
God.
the other guy who's drinking 12 liters of water a day.
12 liters?
Yeah, throughout the whole compass prep, 12 liter.
Holy smokes. Those instances are crazy. So I'm looking at his physique and I'm like, dude, make these adjustments. And within 3 days, he's dry and hard. And I'm like, what's your water intake? 5 liters. I'm okay. Leave the solid at 2,000 milligrams per meal. So he was that was like, I think he was at 10,000 now or 8,000 total salt per day. And I go, that way it's not too extreme one way to the other, even though it's higher than I would normally want it. And then keep your water at 5 liters and then make adjustments from there. But if somebody's low on water, if they're like, I go, get back to me in a couple of days and let me know what your water is. And they're like, oh, it's 3.5 liters. Then I'll bring it up to 5 liters, 4.5, 5 liters. But I don't ever change water intake way up or salt load or water load from 7 days on. If whatever they're drinking consistently, if they're at 5 liters and say 5 grams of sodium or 8 grams of sodium at 7 days, that's staying the same. And I honestly do not change salt at all, ever, all the way through, especially if you're using a diuretic. Salt will be completely standardized all the way to the day of the show. Water intake will change only based on what that person's appearance changes when I carb them up. That's one thing that I always do. And honestly, 90% of the time, water is exactly the same across the board until Friday. And then Friday, it might be reduced. But if they get up Friday morning and they're down in weight, drier and harder, but not full after 1 or 2 days of carbing up, then I keep the water the same again. Because the water needs to be present for them to maximize the glycogen I'm trying to give them with the carbs they're, got in their diet that day. And then Saturday morning, I will look at them and make the call on water that morning. And 99% of the time, I don't cut water out the day of the show. I might include anywhere from 150 to 300 mLs of water per meal the day of the show. In rare incidences, I had a guy, he just looked awesome even after meal 1. That's usually how I call it. I'll look at after meal 1 and a little bit of fluid like coffee for the meal 1 on Saturday, the day of the show. And then I'll look at their physique and be like, you don't need any more water at all. You're good. But most people will need just to keep that consistent, a little bit of water to maintain that fullness. But at that point in time, they should be ready to go. I'm just trying to hold that look all the way until the stage time. I've had one guy though, every time I dropped his water, he looked terribly flat. So he was actually drinking 2 liters the day of the show. My client, Jordan, who won the USAs, he was drinking 3 liters the day of the show. Because the second his water went down, his glutes started to disappear. It's like that water needed to be held into that blood to keep that muscles looking full and round. And he was able to get an insane pump, which for his situation in that day, he needed that fluid. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So you mostly answer all of my questions already. So that's good. But you mentioned diuretics. do you like to use them, or this is something that's sometimes necessary, or just like a quarter of a tap of diazide the night before the show or the morning of the show?
I've moved away from using diazides, hydrochlorothiazides completely this year. And last year, I think only a couple people. I've actually gravitated towards either using alcohol, vitamin C, and aldactone. Now, people freak out and hear aldactone. They're like, "Oh my God, it's potassium! It's not potassium sparing. You're going to get hyperkalemic and this and that." When I'm talking aldactone, I'm talking 12.5 milligrams to 25 milligrams per day. That's it. And I'll explain my thought process behind that is, we all know that it inhibits aldosterone, the hormone responsible for your body to retain water. A lot of times going into a show prep, what do people have? Anxiety, stress. They're worried at the show. And they might have inflammation and fatigue that's brought up that aldosterone a little bit. So sometimes I like to incorporate 12.5 milligrams on Monday and do that daily to assess their response. And then I might titrate that to 12.5 twice per day, and I never go above that. And then I keep the water high, and then I'll keep the sodium the same, and I just adjust the food. And with that, I feel that I'm able to get rid of any excess water, but not water that's going to be taken out of the blood that's going to leave them flat, right? And if I have to fix it, I can easily pull it. So I had incidents where an individual started 12.5 twice per day, and he started to dry out insanely fast within 3 days. So I'm like, this is too fast for my liking. So I went to 12.5 once per day just to kind of maintain that aldosterone suppression to a tiny, tiny bit. And then he ended up filling out and getting harder and fuller, which worked out. But I've had a very good luck with just using a tiny amount of aldactone just to get rid of that little aldosterone. And again, to get rid of that excess water, but not too much water from the blood where they're going to look flat. And then I can carb them up and adjust the food and adjust the water and leave those two variables to adjust only, which makes it, in my opinion, as a coach for myself, much more fail-safe, right? Because there's not too many variables changing. And then it ends up working out really, really well. I don't do that with everybody, probably 40%. And most of the time they're really good 7 days out with fluid, with water and lower carbs. So at that point in time, I'm just like, dude, we're just going to do like 3 or 4 shots of vodka, and load some vitamin C. And that way you'll just get a little drier overnight, but not flat. And in the morning time, I can assess and say, you need more water, you need less water, or stay the same. That's how I handle that. And then the other thing about carb up, one thing that I do that I've done more recently that it's new to me is, instead of backloading a carb up, I front load a carb up, where the carb up is on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then the carbs are reduced Thursday and Friday and the show Saturday. Because sometimes somebody looks way better one low day after 2 high days, right? Because their glycogen might be 90% full, but they're dry, and with water being high. So I've done that this year with a couple, a classic pro in Canada who fucking was so peeled, and it worked wonderfully well. Like, I carbed up so hard to the point of like spilling, and then this one day pulling back, and he was just lights out on stage. He was just lights out, and it worked great. So I do that sometimes. Most of the time, though, I would say, I'm still in that backloading phase where carb up is Thursday and Friday. Sometimes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But I like to watch it very carefully. You know how it is, man. It's like, if you think of when you started prepping people and peak weeking them, it changes every year because you get better and better at it. And you start to see something more consistent that's manageable by you, and it's more fail safe. I just feel that diazides, in my opinion, in my experience, you got to really nail it right, or it could be a little bit hit or miss. And one of my clients from Portugal, great dude, great bodybuilder, and we got away from using diazides completely. And we did a couple shows this past year, and he wanted to use a little bit of a diazide the last show. And we did. I'm like, dude, it's totally cool. And that's one thing I work with my clients sometimes. If they're like, hey, I really want to try this, I'm like, okay, we can try that, but I'm letting you know this, this, and this about it. And this is what could happen. And they're like, okay, I'm totally cool with that. So they know. And we did it, and it wasn't his best look. And, you know, he was one that almost needs more of that water in the blood to give that full look. And he looked great. He was striding. He was lean. He just didn't have that wow factor about his muscles than before when we just didn't use diuretic at all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so let me ask you, what about food on the show day?
Yeah, food in the show day. So Friday's food is Saturday's food. I set it up on Friday to mimic what Saturday is going to be. For example, meal one could be beef and white rice and maybe some butter. I add a little bit of real butter, normal salt, and I'll tell them, okay, so if you're on 4 liters, for example, say you're on 4 liters on Friday, that was what you're scheduled to be on for that person. I might say, I want you to have 1.25 liters by meal 2. Okay. And then you're going to run your rice meal around 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. The first meal. The second meal is going to be cream of rice, chicken, and sometimes butter, peanut butter, jelly, salt, a little extra salt. But that meal 2 is usually pretty big. And when I say big, I mean, like, say if meal 1's 90 carbs, meal 2 might be 120. Not too much bigger, but higher in fat, might be 40 grams of fat. And then I'll have them send me pictures on Friday, an hour after meal 2. And that will give me a real good idea of what they're going to be like Saturday at that point with that amount of water in that food. And then based on that, I'll duplicate that on Saturday if it went perfect. If didn't go perfect, then I'll make minor changes to that meal plan on Friday. But it ends up being no vegetables, ends up being lower protein, ends up being higher carb and usually higher fat. But usually 90% of the time, Friday's amounts is the same thing as Saturday's amounts, except probably a little bit lower protein.
Okay. What about 2 days shows? I know that in UK, in USA, that's not commonly seen. That's the 2 days shows, or am I wrong?
Some of them are 2-day shows. Some pro shows are 2-day shows. There's really no amateur shows that are 2-day shows. They used to do a lot of the pro qualifiers as 2-day shows. Where prejudging is Friday, night show Saturday.
Was in Poland. That's what it is in Poland. Yeah.
Right. But as of recent, as you might know, the number of categories we have now, and we have something like 1,800 people compete in a single national qualifier. So now you have designated days: Wednesday's bikini, Thursday's figure, Friday's classic, Saturday's bodybuilding. So now they do all one category in one day. That's been the new thing lately. But yeah, 2-day shows definitely strikes a challenge. There's no question about that. I am definitely not an expert in 2-day shows. I've had to ask some of my close coach friends advice in the past about it. But some of the things that I've learned is, obviously, you can't keep them dehydrated, right? Yeah. You have to look at them very carefully. So usually I'll run the same sort of protocol as I would a single day show until Saturday. And then after they get off stage prejudging, I usually will make sure they start to hydrate. Now, this is obviously dependent on the person. Anywhere from 200 to 300 mLs of water between meals and 200 to 300 mLs with meals. And then I'll do pictures and weight every 2 meals just to make sure we're consistent with how we've been responding on Friday. Because if Friday night, after they've had a decent amount of water and food, if they look really good, I'm going to compare that look to Saturday's look, right? After prejudging. And just to make sure that their body's responding very similarly. If it looks like they're not responding very similarly, then I'll usually have them do a mild pump workout to kind of get the food and the need to draw that fluid salt back into the blood, into the muscle. And then I might restrict water a little bit, bring it down maybe to 100 to 150 mLs of water between meals and with meals, just to make sure that the water fluid balance is not shifting to the other side. You know what I mean? And then other things I've used in the past were increasing sodium intake. to draw that water back into the blood. But it's a difficult one. That's for sure. It's not super easy, but I think mistakes people make is if they're using diuretics, they dry them out too much and they don't give them enough water to maintain that full look the next day, you know?
Yeah.
And in regards to like any sort of cheat meals, like our dirtier meals that night, I really don't, because I don't have any data points to understand how they're going to respond. And to me, doing that is like, I fucked up, I'm trying to fix something. Or it's like, let's throw something at the wall and see what sticks kind of response. So I'll never, after prejudging on Saturday or Friday, if the night show is Saturday, be like burger and fries after prejudging, and we'll eat a dirty steak meal and this tonight to fill out for finals. I won't do that. If Saturday comes finals and they looks like, man, they're looking kind of like a lackluster in their body, having a plate of French fries, some ketchup, you know, some chicken, and maybe an extra 300 or 400 mLs of water with some salt would bring them back lightning fast. But that look's not going to hold for hours and hours. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That might be something that would be employed if there was something going on that I didn't like. But that's a tough one, man. So it's a real individual basis, as you know. But 2-day shows, that's a pain in the ass.
Okay, so the coming out of the prep. So let's say is that we finish our contest prep season. What to do after? You're a guy who likes to do the health phase, the rebound phase, or maybe go straight into the bulking and like lowers your PEDs, increase your PEDs, leave it the same. What's the preferable way to make the most out of your contest prep and the insulin sensitivity, and obviously keep you in the, let's say, I don't want to use the word healthy because you're obviously not healthy after the competition, but healthier state of body and mind.
Okay, so my current view on post show is really honestly to get healthy. What I mean by that is bringing health parameters back to normal, reestablishing your relationship with food, getting rid of aches and pains and allowing your body to recover from the fatigue that's accumulated through prep. I know when people start to eat food, they feel superhuman and they feel like they're really strong and they're awesome, but their body actually is not. More injuries has occurred post-show than anything because people get really, really strong. They feel good. They have all this energy from food and they start to push too hard, too strong, too hard. And then 10 weeks post-show, they're fat, flat, full of pains and aches, and now they have to come off gear because now they're past that post-show rebound. So I'm a firm believer right away, gear-wise, two approaches. One, come off everything for 4 weeks. Because let's be honest, coming off everything, including testosterone, for a full 4 weeks, obviously tapering your Rimidex and your T3 if you have to do that, you're not going to crash in 4 weeks. You have food coming in your body and you're resting, you're going to feel fine. And then you can implement TRT doses, low doses testosterone at 4 weeks out, and cruise, whatever you want to term it, low testosterone therapy for, say, another 8 weeks. So now you have 12 weeks fully off. Or you just go right on to TRT levels for that 12 weeks. And during this time, my total goal, I always tell my clients, one, reestablish relationship with food. What does that mean? It means that you're not binge crazy. The appetite post-show is not real because obviously the first week you always usually gain 10 to 15 pounds right off the rip. So you're in a surplus, your weight's going up. You're not starving yourself. It's just your fat cells are releasing all the ghrelin to tell you to eat because you deprived yourself so much. So we want to get to the point where we're hungry, but that binge eating relationship with food is good. We want to get to the point where any aches and pains that we've accumulated through prep are gone. We want to get to the point where fatigue from prep is gone. That heavy leg feeling, that tiredness is gone. Your normal sleep schedule is back on order because most people in prep, you're only sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night the last 2 weeks. So usually there's some carryover post-show until you get heavier and heavier, more and more food, and then your sleep improves. You want sleep to get back to normal. So then when we get to 8 to 10 weeks post-show, we're still relatively lean. We still have a great appetite. Insulin sensitivity is good. Relationship's good. Sleep cycle's good. And your body's ready to hit an actual off-season cycle with the presence of all those factors together. I've seen much better results over a long period of time in the off-season than when people come out of the gate, flood the food, flood the gear to catch a rebound. Because again, after coming out of a show and not mitigating that fatigue and dealing with aches and pains and the consequences of prep, 8, 10 weeks post-show, you're going to be flat, fat, have to come off gear. Then you're going to get fatter and flatter because now you're going to be off gear. And you're going to be in a bad situation when you restart your next off-season cycle. I'd rather be smart and play the long game instead of the short game. I've rebounded heavy out of a show before and done that. It didn't work out for me over the whole year. It worked out terribly, actually. I had so much aches and pains developed from that rapid weight gain, those heavy weights. And then when I came off gear, I felt horrible because now you don't have the anti-inflammatory effects of norandulones on your joints when you're already gained 40 pounds of weight and you're 10 weeks post-show, your blood's a mess. You feel like shit. Your appetite's shit at that point. It's a bad scenario. Post-show, I usually tell people for training-wise, train every other day or don't train to failure at all for at least 3 or 4 weeks. Just go to the gym, have fun, get a pump, get ready because you don't want to experience burnout. I know post-show, everybody's motivated. They're like, Coach, I don't even want to cheat. I'm ready to keep going. I don't want to cheat. I don't want anything. And you damn well, as soon as they taste something, they go nuts. And then they go to the gym. They feel like they want to get bigger. And then 12 weeks post-show, they're burnt out and they don't want to train as much. So I want to make sure that motivation stays there. The body's ready. So I back off training. I go train every other day or train 4 days a week, train 2 days on, 1 day off. Just have fun training, get your health parameters back in order. We'll do blood work 4 weeks out from the show to make sure everything's on point there. Then we'll start planning our off-season cycle, planning the nutrition, planning our training and looking at what we have to accomplish by what time and set everything up that way. I just, most of the time too, post-show, during contest prep, we're emotionally unavailable to our significant other and our family. We're non-existent. So now is not the time to sit there and just be like, get right back in this off-season cycle mode. Dude, spend some time with your wife. Spend some time with your family. Have some nice meals off plan within reason. Enjoy a little bit of life for a little bit and kind of get your brain and your body back into that mode of a good off-season push and making sure your health is right, your body's right, and your body fat is at a reasonable level and appetite and digestion are on point. That is been my approach with more success as of late. I've been down that road before. I just don't see it. And again, I said this before, many coaches will change the way they do things over time based on what they see or what they don't see, because we tend to fall into dogmatic processes when we don't have that experience under our belt. And once we gain that experience under our belt, we realize that this isn't working or this isn't working with most people,
Yeah, definitely. I have to agree with you, especially after this season, because I'm doing a rebound, but this is not the rebound I used to. Because the years before, I would stay on the same amount of gear and crapping my workouts as to the ground and doing basically everything you said not to do, to be honest. And this year is totally different. So yeah, and it's looks to doing its purpose. So for now, I'm happy. We'll see if I'm gonna be as happy as now after the 6 weeks, because right now it's barely 3 weeks. So we're gonna see.
It goes by quick, man. And it's it's hard for us to look at the long game sometimes. It's like, where are we going to be 9 months from now? And sometimes as a bodybuilder, we're always looking at where we're going to be next week when we go to the gym and we do pressing movements again. You know what I mean? Like, we got to look at the big picture sometimes. And as being old and older, we gain that wisdom. But when we're younger, we have trouble with that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Chris, thank you so much. I think we speak mostly about everything. So if someone wants to get the knowledge for free, I think that's the like basically rather good guidelines to how to manage his prep, his like off season and contest prep and peaking. If he do it itself, but if he wants to maybe work with you, I'm gonna put everything uh, to reach to you down below in the description box. So if someone wants to connect with you, the email, probably the Instagram, and all of the social media are gonna be linked down below. And if someone's are actually finished the whole podcast, because it's been like 2 hours or even I think more, leave the subscription, leave the comments, leave the thumbs up, and thank you for the watching and thank you for the podcast, Chris.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. It was good talk.
Thank you so much and see you next time.